It's nice to see a Westerner getting used in a Thai love scam. Usually it's the other way around. But before we get into that, let us take a look at our intrepid Western hero who finds himself in a bit of a pickle. We'll call him Mark. Mark is a seasoned traveler. He's been to Thailand many times before and knows the drill. And yet this time he has found himself caught up in a situation which he is finding hard to get out of. Mark meets this Laokai woman, we'll call her Jane, who claims to have been working in Thailand since she was 13. Now that doesn't seem possible. There aren't many jobs around Vientiane, so it would have been pretty easy for her to sneak across the border and start working in a bar or restaurant when she was that young. Of course, people do that kind of thing all the time, so I don't find that part of the story too dodgy. What does seem dodgy is that she has spent the last 2 years with this old guy who has barely done anything else, but work on a house that isn't finished yet. Seems a bit sus. Anyway, Mark starts chatting with Jane and it becomes clear that she's got a big crush on him. She asks him to buy her a gold ring as a sign of his devotion, and then proceeds to tell him that there's no romance involved between them and her old man. Okay. Now Mark, being a seasoned traveler, is understandably suspicious. He knows that this is a classic scam, particularly popular in the northeastern provinces of Thailand, or Isan as it's called, where Mark finds himself. The usual scam goes like this. A poor naive Westerner falls for the charms of a Thai woman. They make plans to return back to her village where she will introduce him to her family and friends. At this point, she reveals that she has no intention of actually going back with him and instead invites him to invest in some dubious business opportunity. In some cases, the money is never recovered and the Westerner is left high and dry. Other times, the scammer just runs off with the money and disappears. But things are a little different in Mark's case. First of all, it's not really Mark that's doing all the pursuing. It's Jane who keeps coming on to him and dropping hints about how great it would be if they were together. Secondly, while Mark has handed over a fair amount of cash for the ring, he hasn't invested any significant amount of money yet. Plus, he seems pretty sure that he's not going to get scammed out of all his life savings. So why is Mark suspicious and why should we care? Well, there are 2 reasons. The first reason is that love scams are terrible and nobody deserves to have their heart broken by a cunning and manipulative partner. We need to help Mark avoid this fate. Secondly, though, Mark is also lucky enough to be documenting his experience on Reddit. His post is hilarious and extremely entertaining. Reading his confusion and frustration at the situation is pure comedy gold. As always, we want to ensure that Mark stays safe throughout this ordeal. And there are a few ways that we can help him do that. Firstly, we need to establish whether Jane is playing him or if this is all just a big misunderstanding. If she is playing him, then Mark needs to be careful. She could be looking to steal from him, or even worse, hurt him physically. If it's just a big misunderstanding, then Mark might be able to resolve the issue by having an honest conversation with Jane. One way Mark could test Jane to see if she's playing him is by pretending to go along with her plan. He could agree to buy her the ring and then see what happens next. Does she try to pressure him into giving her more money? Does she start talking about returning to her village? This approach, however, has its risks. If Jane is a good scammer, she may not show her cards, meaning Mark could end up handing over a lot of money before he realizes he's been duped. Another approach would be to encourage Mark to ignore Jane completely. If he cuts off all contact, she either go away or start making threats. If she makes threats, then it's time to call the police. But if she simply walks away, then Mark might be onto something. Perhaps Jane wasn't really trying to scam him at all. Maybe she was just looking for some company, or maybe she was hoping that Mark would buy her a drink or two. There are, of course, other ways that Mark could test Jane, but the most important thing to remember is that he needs to stay safe. If she's a violent person, then nothing else matters. Mark's safety must come first. Let's take a look at Mark's post again. You might notice a few details that we didn't mention before. For example, Jane claims to be 35 years old, but looks significantly younger. She also admits to sleeping with Mark's old man, saying that she fell for him because of his stories about life in the West. These details add a new dimension to the story. On one hand, they make Jane seem more pathetic. It's sad that she slept with an old broke pensioner. On the other hand, they make Jane seem more dangerous. A woman willing to sleep with an old man for money is the type of woman who is willing to sleep with anyone for money. But let's not forget the elephant in the room. What about the age gap? Why would a 35-year-old woman go out with a 70-year-old man unless there was money involved? Granted, there is a 35-year difference between these two, but this age gap is less shocking than you might think. We all remember that viral post a few years ago that showed a Thai wife and her 70-something-year-old Westerner husband. The age gap in that relationship wasn't nearly as bad as it is in this one. Yet that couple faced a lot of judgment and criticism online. The reality is that relationships with large age gaps aren't as uncommon as you might think. Some people just have a thing for older or younger partners. Could this be what's happening with Jane? Is she just attracted to older men? Well, it's certainly possible. But it's also possible that she's after Mark's money. Now, it's not appropriate for us to talk about Jane's appearance like this, but it's worth noting that physical appearance is an important factor in how people perceive others. If Jane looks much younger than her stated age, then it's less likely that people will underestimate her intelligence and assume that she's naive and easily manipulated. This could lead to Mark being less suspicious of her and more likely to trust her. Finally, let's consider Jane's behavior. She seems to be quite comfortable around Mark. She's not afraid to touch him or initiate physical contact. This could be an attempt to build trust, or it could be a way of testing him to see how far he's thus willing to go. Jane is also very forward with Mark. She doesn't beat around the bush. When she wants something, she just goes for it. This direct approach could be seen as refreshing, or it could be a sign that she's not interested in building a genuine relationship with Mark. So what should Mark do next? Well, it's ultimately up to him, but we have a few suggestions. First of all, he should keep documenting his experience on Reddit. That way we can follow along and see how the story unfolds. Secondly, Mark needs to be careful. He shouldn't give Jane any more money, and he should avoid going to her village. Lastly, Mark should be prepared for anything. Jane could turn out to be a sweet, innocent girl who just wants a friend. Or she could be a cunning scammer who's after Mark's money. Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our other videos about Thailand.